Brook lends its name to many of Arlington's streets, buildings, and businesses, yet the brook itself remains largely unknown and unsung. For too long, it's gone unnoticed and even neglected, but Brook played a commanding role in Arlington's beginnings and growth, and today it holds great potential to enhance the town's verdant open spaces. The brook's geological origins are lost in the depths of prehistory. Scientists tell us that in the last ice age, Brook was a roaring river. Today, its flow is gentle and modest. It begins just west of Arlington in the wetlands called the Great Meadows, and it empties into the lower Mystic Lake after leaving Meadowbrook Park and Mount Pleasant Cemetery. In the course of its run, it descends some 150 feet over nearly 3 miles. Native Americans lived along the brook for many generations. One of their tribal leaders, known as Squaw Sachem, deeded much of the land to the local colonists. In 1637, Captain George Cook built a mill on the brook. He diverted its water to create a pond, releasing the water as needed to power his grist mill. Less than 10 years later, Cook left his mill in the hands of his millwright, John Fonnell, and returned to England. For more than 200 years, many mills prospered along the banks of the brook. They turned out everything from flour and lumber to medicines and saws. The mills were sold and resold, willed to heirs, went bankrupt, sometimes were abandoned, and too often were destroyed by fire. The roster of descendants from those mill owners reads like a who's who of early Massachusetts history. Names like Robbins, Fessenden, Winship, and especially Cutter. By the 1840s, a new family of German immigrants added their name to the roster. 5 Schwalm brothers from the Rhineland built mills along the brook. The industrious brothers diversified into a number of profitable markets. Charles Schwalm outfitted his mill with lathes that could fashion wood into oval and round picture frames. With the Civil War spurring demand for photographic portraits, the Schwalm mill quickly became a leading supplier to households and retailers. Another brother, Theodore, manufactured the often elaborate wooden cases that housed the mechanisms for pianos. In an era when many families of means had pianos in their parlors, the demand for Schwalm's cases was strong. At one time or another, the Schwalm brothers owned 7 mill buildings along the brook. Their picture frame business continued all the way into the late 1960s. In 1970, a grassroots preservation trust led by Patricia Fitzmaurice purchased the former Charles Schwalm mill. Since then, the trust has operated it as a living history museum. Today, the old Schwalm mill still turns out elegant picture frames. It's one of the oldest continually operating mill sites in the United States. The beginning of the end for water-powered mills on the brook came in 1871. The town of Arlington obtained rights to divert water flowing from the Great Meadows. Their objective? To create a reservoir for the town's water supply. That meant millers, such as the Schwalms, faced losing water power. They and many others went to court. But nothing could stop technological change. Over the next 50 years, steam and then electricity replaced power from the brook. So today, Brook continues to flow through the heart of town, even though it no longer powers Arlington industry. But it's not exactly free-flowing. Over the years, it's been channeled, impeded by dams, obscured by overgrowth, and even buried in underground culverts. In fact, much of the land on which Arlington High School and its playing fields stand was once the 8-acre Cutter's Mill Pond. Now the town owns only about 35% of the land adjacent to the brook. The rest is privately owned. Sadly, the brook is also polluted. In 2018, it earned a grade of C- from the Mystic River Watershed Association. As early as the 1920s, concerned residents and town officials began making proposals to rescue Brook and once again make it a celebrated resource. These proposals, continuing today, include ways to beautify the brook, cleanse its water, contribute to the town's economy, and develop its recreational potential. The Ethel Wellington Park is an example of how the brook and the land along it have been enhanced to better serve the public. Within its leafy confines, the park offers not only walking paths and restful benches, but also, for the more actively inclined, tennis courts and a climbing wall. Even more improvements for Wellington Park, the brook and its banks between Brattle and Grove Streets, are on their way. The work will result in a model for revitalizing town-owned areas in the Millbrook corridor. It's funded by grants from the state's Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs and from the town's Community Preservation Act. Taking a cue from an initiative of the Mystic River Watershed Association, the upgrading will include flood control, environmental improvements, and increased public access. Wellington Park and other sites, such as Cook's Hollow and the reservoir, demonstrate that with imagination and willpower, both public and private land along Millbrook and the brook itself can once again become contributors to the health, beauty, and vitality of Arlington. As it has been throughout Arlington's history and for eons before, Millbrook is a valuable and timeless natural resource. It deserves celebration and, above all, care. That becomes evident to all who walk its banks and hear its music.